I'm sorry, Genshin bros, but I did it. I committed a grave sin. I played Honkai Star Rail. So let's talk about it. Hello there, Flip here, and today I'm going to be talking about my initial impressions of Honkai Star Rail after playing it for about 2 weeks now. So I'm going to be covering my experience with the gameplay, quality of life, story, and essentially just giving it a review and comparing it to my Genshin experiences. Though I'm not at Endgame, I've still done all the story quests to recency, I've cleared the first stages of the Forgotten Hall, and pushed to World 8 on the simulated universe. So when I do eventually beat all the content, which I estimate will happen in roughly 1 to 2 months, I'll make a follow-up video on how that experience is. Also, hi, post-recording Flip here, but I say a lot in this video that Genshin is open world where HSR is less expensive to excuse some of the faults in Genshin, but I say it so much that I just decided to cut it out as it doesn't really add much, so just keep watching with that in mind when I compare the games. The first thing I guess I want to talk about is the gameplay, as I mean, it's a game, that's the most important part, and compared to others, Star Rail being a turn-based game was never really a turn-off for me. Pokemon is one of my favorite franchises, and I've played all the games, and I'm also a massive Shodan nut, so as long as the turn-based combat is good, I'd be down for it. And so far, Star Rail has had very good turn-based mechanics, some things I like and some things not so much, but like how I deal with all my problems, let's ignore them for now and focus on the positives. The baseline mechanics are quite simple. You have a basic attack, ultimate, and your skill. Skill does cool shit but consumes a limited resource called skill points. Your basic attacks normally don't do anything special but generate a skill point, so you can do the cool shit. And then your ultimate is the peak of your cool shit that can be used to interrupt characters or enemy turns. And then you have talents and techniques that play into your character's kit. It's a good system which with the variety of characters offers a good gameplay loop, but I can't really progress without talking about something I don't really like, and that is the path system and the element system. The element system has the depth of a kiddie pool. It's the equivalent of using an element purely for the shield breaking against enemies that are weak to it, and if you break the shield with wind, you get a damage over time effect. If you break it with fire, you get a damage over time effect. If you break it with physical, go on, guess, you get a damage over time effect. And yes, I know Quantum, Ice, and Imaginary do different things, but they repeat the same DOT effect 4 times, and it becomes even funnier when you realize there are some characters that just apply the DOT even if the enemies have their shield up. So like, I just don't think the element system is that interesting, same case with the path system. To me, one of the best parts about RPGs is expression, and being able to interpret characters and their abilities how you like. But with the path system, it just tells you what the character's role is, and if you deviate from this role then you're playing the character inoptimally. It's very streamlined, and later on I can see the system getting stale. Like, oh, a new Harmony character comes out, I can't wait to see what they do. It also kind of eliminates wacky builds outside of designated roles, because light cone effects, which are essentially weapons, will only work on the character in the given path. In Genshin, you can have a character like Kokomi who's a healer and is supposed to be built around that, but because of her Hydra application, you can opt to use her in Bloom teams as a reaction damage dealer, and you can also just use her as a carry herself on one of Hydra teams. And all of these different playstyles are all viable and competitive, where on Star Rail you take an abundance character like Lynx and it's like, on this team she heals and cleanses, on this team she also heals and cleanses. It's just a very lazy way of making characters. Anyways, combat mechanics are only as valuable as the combat content in the game, in which HSR has... I'll just summarize it down to the 2 ones I have the most experience with, being the Forgotten Hall and the simulated universe. The Forgotten Hall is just a spiral abyss. I can't talk about how it scales, but so far this isn't really anything mind-blowing, it's just a time trial but with cycles instead of a timer. However, simulated universe, it's very fucking cool. There's also so much content to get out of it. It functions as a roguelite, with a random assortment of enemies and areas where you collect buffs that drastically alter your team's power, blah blah blah. I like it a lot because you can take a lot of different buffs even outside of your chosen path and mix and match them to create very interesting scenarios. I was mostly using my Dot team because there's no erudition path for my Qingchui, and there were buffs for freeze which I could pick up to use freezing abilities on my Dot team to stack a fuck ton of essentially STDs on the enemies. So by the time they could move, they have stage 4 AIDS mixed with crabs. It's the best thing ever. And I think the things I love the most is that you also get rewards, and really good rewards, for doing simulated universe every week. You basically get 4 free condensed resin to spend on artifacts, which are exclusive to the simulated universe floors, and some of these are game changers, giving you a lot of stat buff to your character, or just being an overall benefit to your team. One thing I think Genshin lacks is enticing rewards outside of Primo Gems, as the motivation to do any content is Primos, where even if Storyl didn't give its gacha currency as a reward in Simulated Universe, people would still do it for the chance of these artifacts. And if you clear enough of the Simulated Universe, you get another currency for a shop that sells some pretty good 5-star light cones. Like, I actually love this system so much. I can't wait to get bored of it in 2 months. Since I'm already on the topic of rewards, let's talk about the progression in Storyl and how characters are built, etc. Right off the bat, whoever decided that 5 stars will take more resources than 4 stars needs to be assassinated with maximum efficiency. I think the fact that 5 stars just take more is stupid. Like, literally, why am I getting punished for pulling a character? I apologize, I'm never pulling again. On top of that, what am I looking at? Who thought this was okay? And I've already expressed my discontent with how they handle light cones. Leveling, Ascensions, Adventure or Trailblazer rank, they're all essentially the same, but I think Genshin being less of a mess, and Genshin not being racist against 5 stars makes it a better overall progression system. There are also relics or artifacts, but I'm not far enough in the game to discuss that, so just wait on my follow-up video when I'm really down in the trenches. I had to rewrite this last section, which is the event section, because it's hard to talk about this in detail without being put on an FBI hit list. Okay, pretend you're Hoyoverse. Let's make these amazing combat features and never use them. The minigames that frustrated me in Genshin are just as prevalent here, and it was arguably worse because so I could grind out my Trailblazer XP, I did it back to back to back. I now understand why these events are limited, because having to do them in sequence has to be some kind of ancient Victorian torture method. Ethereum Wars, Aurum Alley, and I forgot what the last event was, Ghostbusters. But to be fair, the Ghostbusters event was actually my favourite and in my opinion good, because it didn't take the story too seriously. And there was so much combat in these events and they put a spin on it in a unique way. And the characters were all entertaining and it had multiple Ching-Tre appearances. The other 2 events had lackluster stories that were dragged out way too long, whilst also adding in puzzles and mechanics that are never going to be seen again. I don't understand why they go through with the effort of giving these minigames development time when these assets are never going to be used, instead of just using the resource time to develop the core game. And I wish I could just ignore these events, but the rewards. So now I'm grumpy and I hate the events. Except for Ghostbusters. More events like that, please. Overall, I do think I prefer more of the gameplay systems in Genshin more so than Storyl. I think Genshin has more expression in its combat, where HSR just has better combat content in things like the Simulated Universe. Storyl's progression is just too much. I don't know who the dev team thinks they are, and the events in both of these games are equally as garbage, so let's talk about the characters next. Almost a year ago now, I asked my community which game between Storyl and Genshin had better art direction and character designs, and the majority of them said Genshin. But I want to know what kind of crack, cocaine, fentanyl were they taking, because on a pure aesthetic basic, the Honkai Storyl designs are so much cooler, cuter, hotter. They win in literally every department. And then HSR decides to just casually have peak character design in Ching-Tre. So real quick, I'm just going to talk about some of my favorite HSR characters. Sampo. I don't get why everyone just hates him. He's super funny and keeps the story interesting as he's just that guy. Next up, Ronmei. Mental illness is my favorite trait in anime women, and Ronmei's defining character trait is that she's autistic. Next up, Kafka, because oh my fucking god. This is probably the best design Hoyoverse has ever made. Whatever person had a hand in designing this perfection needs 10 raises and under the desk support. And not only is she hot as hell, but she happens to just be one of the most interesting characters in the game, and her story quest, so peak. Which I guess is a gateway to talk about the story elements. Right off the bat, in terms of character stories, I think HSR just does a way better job, as the character story actually focuses on the characters and not some random NPC. Going back to Kafka's story quest, it was so precise and focused on exploring Kafka's character that we literally stay in the same spot the entire quest. And not only that, we get a deeper insight into Kafka's background and motivations for why she became a Stellaron hunter, with enough room to explore later facets of her character. This is how you write a character story quest. And from playing others like Hooks, Natasha's, and Serval's, it seems like all of those character quests have these intentions in mind, making you more attached to the characters. One more thing I need to talk about is how the characters are actually in the overworld. I was just walking through Zhanzhou and I saw Ching-Tre and I was thinking like, what? Do I have a quest for her? But no, this is just an encounter you have, and you're able to have discussions with Ching-Tre about how she has perfected slacking off, and it just makes the world feel a lot more alive than going past NPC 1098. Genshin is an open world game, Storyl is not. It is crazy criminal for it to have a more immersive and alive universe. But that's enough deep when glazing, let's talk about the actual main story, because a lot of people were talking about how amazing Star Rail's main story was, and how much better it was than Genshin's. I don't see it. I've seen so many complaints about how Zhanzhou was bad and just a yap fest, but like, Belobog was equally as terrible if not slightly better, and no main story quest so far has even been better than Mondstadt in terms of quality in my opinion. Hello, post-recording flip again. I went on quite a big rant about the stories, and I realized that nobody cares. TLDR, Genshin's story is more simplistic, you know who's on your side, and it doesn't go for bait and switches. There's a very clear good and bad setup, where HSR tries to complicate the relationships a lot, and tries to keep you on your toes, like who's your friend, who's your enemy. But the problem is that HSR doesn't really give the time for this to work, so it just falls really flat. Which is why even though Genshin's story is simpler, it's just executed a lot better. Speaking of things that were overhyped, everyone said that the formulas in Genshin are relatively the same as HSR, which is true, but the number one thing people told me would be hard about HSR theory crafting was speed tuning. In practice, getting the right speed substats may be hard, but in theory, where is the complication? Wow, did you know that you want to have your buffers with the most speed so you can pass buffs to your DPS? Did you know that at certain breakpoints you can move twice in one cycle, but those breakpoints have already been documented so it actually takes no time to understand? Did you know if you delay an enemy's action with weakness break or freeze, they go later in the cycle? I'm disappointed. The most frustrating thing for me to grasp is just the sheer amount of different status effects and just the character kits in general. But once I get that down, expect some Star Rail content coming from me. Now that's all I have to say about Star Rail in detail, so let's just wrap this video up by talking about small things I liked, which Genshin should have. The fact that if you have two characters with a relationship, when adding them to your party you get unique dialogue.
Jingchue? Ahem. I knew you weren't in the repository. I've been waiting here for you for some time.
Weird. How'd the Master Diviner figure out I'd be here?
Being able to check your character's kits and abilities as well as what buffs they have on them mid-combat. Having a dialogue log that you can open which shows all the messages sent in a cutscene. The ability to ask characters to repeat certain things you may have missed. Being able to do multiple domain runs without having to reset. Being able to use your friend's characters. Automatically being able to teleport to the nearest waypoint in a quest objective. The ability to replay old main events and have the story and rewards intact. A counter on the amount of resources you have left in an area. Qingchui. Not having to go to a stupid fucking NPC to collect my daily commission or expedition rewards. Having overcapped resin be stored in an alternate resin store that does recharge slower but ensures that your resin isn't wasted. And finally, please just give us more endgame content. I don't care whose dick I have to suck or how many. All in all, I'm still more inclined to recommend Genshin over HSR. The way people would talk about this game, you'd think it's the second coming of Christ, but at the end of the day, it's still a gacha game. You're choosing between trash or garbage whichever route you go, but we'll see if my tastes change the more I play HSR. And on that note, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts on Star Rail, as I'd love to hear and I respond to almost every single comment. Thanks once again for watching, and I'll see you on the flip side. Peace.